Hello and welcome to the session. This session is slightly the extension of the earlier theoretical part. Now let's get started. Now let's understand the keyword driven framework as a overall architecture, and let's deep dive into individual part. Now keyword driven framework or user action is technically speaking a set of user actions which we will be passing to the automation framework to execute in a particular sequence, and that automation framework will actually do the from the coding side, it will execute and it will do that particular action or a behavior, the intended behavior. Very simple example is, as a keyword we are saying that click on some web element or do a particular action, so type something in the search text box. So that is the user action or a keyword we will be passing to this automation framework, and the automation framework will actually do the real world activities. It will actually uh, go to the browser and do this action. Now, in order to support that, we have input using Excel file, and we'll be seeing how the test case execution, sequencing, and other cases. Now, one of the major part here is having a list of keywords or user actions which are required to develop this automation framework. Now, there are different aspects here. So, as per the business requirement, let us see. So I have come up with this non-exhaustive list of different user actions or keywords, or also called as repository. So these are basically typical browser related 16-17 actions a user can do, and this can still expand. So for example, clicking, double clicking, right click, some common user actions, and then pop-up handling, alert handling, drag and drop. So these are the typical actions or the very common actions can be done by a user when testing a web application. Now, other things are apart from the normal test case execution, normal action on a browser, we would also want that the automation framework should support other things like test report preparation, test report emailing, logging, environment setup, test data preparation. So that can also be considered as a user action, because anyway we do those action when we execute the test cases manually or with some kind of a tool, etc. Now, some of the actions for database related are obviously connect to database, disconnect to database, raise SQL queries, or pass the SQL response, and so on. Now, desktop related actions for desktop automation are basically moving a mouse to a XYZ location, press some keys or type something, basically pressing a key and click on a desktop, and multiple actions. Now, as I said, this is non-exhaustive list, and you can expand this as per your business requirement and use it. Now, to technically speak, how the internal structure of this automation keyword-driven automation framework will be like this. So what we will be really doing is basically, this is our application under test. This is your actual core framework, and the framework will consist of those functionality or methods which can be controlled by passing the particular ID of that keyword or user action by external means. Now, external means, for simplicity, we will write down the user actions or the keywords in from an external source. It can be a text file as simple as that, or a very convenient and easy approach is to write down the keywords or user actions in an Excel file. Excel file being very common in the community, and it is very easy to write it and communicate among the different teams. Now, to process the Excel files in different languages, we have different libraries. For example, in Java, we have Apache POI. In Python, again, there are some equivalent libraries, and so on. Now, if you see these particular users actions or keywords, I have grouped it with some logic, and this individually can be called as one test case, for example, having different set of actions. Now that particular test cases, now considering the framework has to process multiple test cases or test scenarios, so we need to have a test execution control mechanism. So that can be done either using TestNG JUnit for Java programming, or maybe PyTest in Python programming. Now in Java, we have this additional thing called as Maven tool or a Maven framework. Uh, This is used to manage the external jar files, dependencies, and execution control of the test cases. Now, the one of the greatest advantage when using keyword driven framework is once you have developed a mature uh, framework using any programming language, and once you have a mechanism implemented to uh, uh, pass on the different keywords or actions to this framework. So now today if you're doing application under test 1, let's say application 1, tomorrow your application may change, or let's say from one website you go to another website or another module or another project. So now you have this basic framework ready which holds the core logic, so that the same framework can be used by a manual testing person or any stakeholders who, by the way, need not to have any programming background or any programming knowledge. So what that person has to do is just play with the keywords, just change the actions, and we know how to control those actions using this different mechanism, and different application under test or different website can be tested very easily. Now this, once this is ready, this change can be done by any person, any manual QA person, and that is the main advantage here, that keyword driven framework is typically used, is developed by automation team, but it is used by manual QA or even semi manual QA, so which is like an intermediate between manual person and who is just understanding the programming language and wants to switch to the uh, automation framework side. So it is really fit for those people, and of course it can be used for a day-to-day application. Now to achieve this programmatically, we can have Java or Python or any other popular programming language. So we will understand, we will install this on uh, a Windows machine, and we'll simply write a hello world program, and we will get started with a basic programming concept. Then we will see how to process this Excel using this Java. If it is Java, Apache PUI library, and if it is Python, then some other equivalent library. Then, so now what is the expectation from an Excel? So a typical requirement is we need to read a particular cell X and Y combination, row and column combination, and we need to set the value. So we will write something into this. Is a very basic requirement. But then how do we make use of it for automation framework is, let's say we read the Excel line by line. So in this example, consider that is an employee data. So we have some rows and columns. So there are hundreds of employees. So we have the employee data. So what we do is we read the Excel row by row and parse the individual column data and use it for automation purpose or any equivalent purpose. Now, instead of this, as a part of keyword driven framework, what we can do, instead of passing the data, the static data, what we can do is we can pass on, or we can write the test cases and test step related item, test step related data or the actions. And now what we can do is we will read this Excel file. So what we'll do is we'll read the keywords of the user action. Then we will read the particular action. For example, this is the keyword. This is the action we want to do. This is a Selenium related action. The action is click. And actually, once this is passed and processed, the automation framework should have to perform that particular operation. And that is the way how an keyword driven framework behaves, and it can be developed in this way. Right. So now, technicality wise, in Excel we have spreadsheet, workbook, say row, cell, row, column, cell type, and other things. Now there are two popular formats. One is HSSF, which is for .xls file, and XSSF, which is for .xlsx file. Now this is some being the latest one, and Microsoft also is promoting this particular structure now onwards. So our example will be totally based on XSSF file or .xlsx file. Now there are some differences here. You might need this in for your any interview preparation, right? And then we will see how using Java programming and um, the required automation framework if you want to develop. for Selenium automation. So we will see some Selenium programming. So here basically we will see how to identify web elements and how to do certain actions on that. Then for Java track, we will see the Maven part, what are the expectation from Maven tool and so on. So now let us deep dive into individual part, starting from the core Java part in the subsequent session. Thank you.